motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Solomon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker, and may I thank the member for Werriwa for this motion. I'm really glad that we got to speak on it, because in the last sitting we weren't able to. I'm really glad that it's come up again. Whilst I don't usually point out the weaknesses of the previous government, because they're clear to all, two things are clear. They're in office for almost 10 years and the gender pay gap hardly moved. And notwithstanding that, it was a deliberate strategy of the former federal government, whether it be Abbott, Turnbull or Morrison, the member for Cook, to keep wages low. And what we have seen and what Australians have seen in the 6 months of our government under the Prime Minister, the member for Grainler, Anthony Albanese, is turning that around and turning that around smartly. I want to talk about workforce a bit. According to the OECD, Australia is experiencing the second most severe labour shortage in the developed world, and that's been exacerbated by COVID-19 and those 10 long years of policy neglect. As honourable members will know, Australian businesses are crying out for workers. The migrants who have made or want to make Australia home have been trapped mostly in this administrative limbo for years. It's no secret that the cost of living has always been higher in places like the one that I represent in Northern Australia. So in the regions generally in Australia, we pay a bit more. That's for a number of reasons, but it being difficult to attract workers is one of them, and an insufficient focus on training so that our Aussie kids and our territory kids, in my example, have the skills. So that's where the fee-free TAFE and the more federally funded university places come in. But I'll get to that in a minute. I continually speak with businesses and industry groups in my electorate about the challenges they're facing, and by far this is the biggest concern up in our neck of the woods, this worker shortage. The member for Gordon, the Skills and Training Minister, recently came to Darwin, and we met with a broad cross-section of industry, and they all told him the same thing, that a lack of skilled workers, whether they be from overseas or us building our own, making our own, is adding to the increased cost of living, is affecting productivity, and it's acute. Now, unfortunately, the previous government left our migration system and education and training sectors in crisis. They did not support, when COVID hit, either groups. And now migrants, understandably, are choosing other nations ahead of Australia because they find that their systems are simpler, quicker and cheaper to navigate. And they didn't want to sit around waiting for years for us to decide whether we could use our skills or not. Just imagine the productivity and the growth that would have occurred if we had supported people to stay. Now, they moved on, and now we're a bit caught short. The migration system needs a review, and that's what we're doing. Businesses are finding it exceedingly difficult to hire staff. The processing times for visas means they're waiting for much too long, months, many months, often years, for an application to be processed, and that's why we've put more staff into the processing of those applications. The feedback I've had from Hospitality NT and other industry stakeholders is that restaurants in Darwin and Palmerston in my electorate are finding it incredibly difficult to find chefs and floor staff, and sometimes they're having to close midweek. Or they're only opening a few nights a week, or having to close the kitchen early when they do open. So call out to any young Territorians and young Australians, come up to the north. If you want some work, we've got some work in our hospo industry. Some of our hospitality businesses are finding it so difficult because with less openings, less revenue, but of course, Mr Deputy Speaker, their leases and overhead costs, they aren't any lower, so it's a very difficult time for them. But the biggest thing that I think we've seen is our support of lower workers on low wages, and that's something I'm very proud of with our government.